I got to play Madden 23 for the last month as part of the closed beta along with many others, so I'm here to give the final review on everything you need to know about the gameplay, the good and the bad, and what you can expect when the game drops in a little over a month. Now, many people have talked about the beta, myself included in previous videos, but once you play the game longer and you play against more actual users, you start seeing the game a little bit differently. Some of the problems start to show themselves, but also some of the things that you liked are reaffirmed the more you play it. And also, there'll be exclusive gameplay dropping on this channel pretty soon, so make sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon on so you don't miss any of that when it drops, along with the other Madden 23 news. So let's start with the good. The first one off top is Escape Artist is no longer a regular ability, it's an X factor. This is a huge plus to the game. You don't have to worry about people scrambling non-stop every play and not being able to catch them. Also, to go along with this, they have definitely fixed the containment of mobile QBs. Fast QBs without Escape Artist can still roll around, but the outside defenders are going to play them much more intelligently now. Even if they're not in a contain, when you break the pocket, they will try to get out there and contain the QB instead of mindlessly rushing against the offensive line. So they do a much better job at not letting QBs just run crazy east and west. Another good thing is the tackling for sure. It's one of the biggest upgrades of the game this year. It actually feels like the best tackling that Madden has had in a very long time, certainly since it's been on the Frostbite engine. There's still a little bit of wonkiness with this that I'll talk about in the bad section, but overall tackling has seen a major upgrade this year. You see a lot more tackling animations. You definitely see better physics. You see a bunch of different tackle animations play out, whereas in the past you would see a lot of the same ones over and over. There are still a few certain types of tackle animations that you definitely see more often than others, but there's much more variety. There's much more different outcomes. There's more hits. There's more ganging up on players and knocking the ball loose, trying to punch the ball out. There's a lot more interactions where people can come in late and pile on to already existing tackle animations. So all in all, I would say tackling is one of the biggest improvements of the game this year, and it's still an area that they could make even better. So don't take this as that it's perfect or even close to perfect, but if you're talking about Madden and the previous games, it's one of the most notable improvements you will see after playing one drive of the game. You'll notice how much smoother it is, how much more interactions you get, and it just looks a lot more realistic than some of these previous games. Now we're going to continue on, but really quickly, let's hear a word from today's video sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Pristine Auction. PristineAuction.com is the most trusted sports memorabilia auction site with an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Auctions on PristineAuction.com start at just $1 each day, and there are over 1,000 autographed items available, so you win signed authentic signatures at affordable prices. Just last week, a Justin Herbert signed jersey went for just $110, and deals like that are happening all the time on PristineAuction.com. They have just about every player you could want: Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, you name it. And every item on Pristine Auction comes with a certificate of authenticity from the industry's most reputable authenticators. Upgrade your collection of signed memorabilia today and get $10 off your first item one when you use my code RAYWEATHER. And they're even giving me this awesome Alvin Kamara signed helmet to give away to you guys. You can see right here, it is even authenticated by Beckett, so you know it's the real deal. Yeah, I ain't gonna lie, this bad boy is pretty nice, and you can win this right here. All you have to do is sign up on their website using my registration code RAYWEATHER to be entered. Links are in the description below. The next good thing is zone defense, one of the biggest improvements this year. Now, a lot of people talked about how good the zones were after the first couple days of playing the beta. It was super noticeable just how much smarter they were and how much better they played. However, when you play for a few weeks, you start to understand it a little better. You start to see maybe some of the spots where they do still have a little bit of issues, which we'll talk about in the bad section, but overall, zone defense has seen a major improvement, and it's another thing you'll notice pretty quickly when playing. They're much more intelligent than they've been in previous years. They pick up routes like crossing routes and corner routes that come into their area if there's no deep threat pulling the zone deeper downfield, whereas in past games, you could throw the ball right underneath these guys every single time like clockwork, even if it was Jalen Ramsey, and they would just never respond to it, or they would just be so late that it didn't matter. The deep zones do a great job against a lot of the popular old one-play touchdown combinations. They're much more intelligent. They stay back there where they're supposed to be and don't get easily beat. However, there are still certain route combinations that can open up a one-play touchdown, but most of the ones that I saw were at least somewhat realistic. Some route combinations are supposed to open up a deep shot. You're putting the deep safeties in conflict. The problem in the past was a lot of the one-play touchdowns, you really weren't putting the safeties or the deep zones into a true conflict. It was more so that just one of the deep zones would kind of dumb out past a certain point and just wasn't able to recover. You don't really see that as much, so they definitely play true to where they're supposed to be on the field. The new drift logic for zone defenders is another thing that goes along with this. It's very noticeable. They just get where they're supposed to be a lot quicker on the field. They stay where they're supposed to stay. They don't drift in covered grass. They backpedal and they break on the ball a lot more smoothly. Flat zones are another area, the hard flats to be specific. They jump routes on the flats very consistently, whereas in years past they would drift too far to the middle or drift too far back. Now if you've got a guy in a hard flat and you try to throw a quick flat to a tight end or a running back or something like that, they will jump that and likely take it for 6 the other way. So it's just nice to see overall zone defenders actually playing with some sense of awareness. They jump routes and they stay where they're supposed to be. The wide receiver and DB interactions are also another area that I think most people, if you pay attention, will notice a big change here. Now, they've talked about this in previous years, but I would say this year you see the biggest difference now. They really interact a lot more with each other. There's a lot of head faking. There's a lot more different releases, different kind of hitches in certain wide receivers' routes. You see the head tracking for both DBs and receivers a lot smoother now. You can see how they look around. There's a lot of different press animations. There's a lot of jostling, especially if you put a top receiver versus a top cornerback and you just kind of run through some plays in practice mode, for example, you'll see a lot of different outcomes. Pass rush is another area of the game that's really good. It's a little more controversial. Some people think it's too fast. I think most people seem to agree that it's about right, though. It definitely is faster than previous games, but that's a good thing. You shouldn't have all day in the pocket to just roll around, run around crazy, throw these one-play touchdowns. You can't throw deep every play in the NFL, and you certainly can't do that in Madden 23. It really gives the defense a realistic feel, and it makes it a little tougher to play against a defense, whereas in past Maddens, it was just super easy to just kind of fool them with the simplest of plays over and over and over. Now with the pass rush being good, you have to be mindful of getting the ball out quick, and with zone defense being better, you have to be mindful of where you're actually throwing. Motion snapping is also back on offense, which a lot of people seem to like. This has been a thing that's kind of come and gone over the years because there were a lot of ways to abuse it with glitches, especially in man defense. You can kind of get the man on defense to switch his assignment and be matched up on the wrong guy. So they took a lot of motion snapping out of the game in certain formations. Now it's back. They finally fixed all of those issues where the man defender would change up who he was defending if you motioned a receiver. Now they follow them a lot more properly. They'll follow them to the other side of the field. So it's kind of good for the offense because sometimes you can get the tell if they're in man or zone, just like they do in real life when they send guys in motion. But also motion snapping just opens up more possibilities on offense because you can get a guy in motion, get him a cleaner release, and sometimes that'll help him get open a little bit easier. They made tight end blocking better by making it worse, which is a good thing. It sounds weird, but that's good. Tight ends do not pass block nearly as well as offensive linemen. In past Madden games, they did very well. Now, if you try to block with a tight end and you're not mindful and they're on a good pass rusher, they're going to get absolutely destroyed, which they should. Another nice thing here to end off the good section is chip blocking. You see a lot more chip blocking this year, which is a very good thing. You see it a ton in the NFL. So instead of blocking your tight end, he'll go out on a route, but he will try to chip that defensive end a lot more often, and it buys you that extra half second sometimes to get the ball off. Not something we've really seen in Madden too consistently, at least in my opinion, not on purpose. Now you see a lot more chip blocking, which I think is a very good addition to the game. Now let's talk about the bad, and we have to start mainly with blocking, which is funny because we ended off the good section with a couple of areas of blocking that actually are good, but overall the blocking, especially the O-line, is still pretty bad in Madden 23, and this has been an area that has needed to be fixed for a while. Some years it's better than others, some years it gets worse, some years it gets a little better. It's kind of weird. This year, not saying it's really any worse than before, but it's certainly not better. It's still bad. And you notice it much more when you see how much better they have made the tackling and the zone defense. When you see these other areas that were also pretty bad and they've made those better, it kind of makes the O-line stand out even more for how bad it is. They still let guys in way too easily. They still let guys shed very easily, and I understand that the pass rush by default is better, so it kind of makes the O-line maybe look even worse than it actually is, but it's just the way they don't pick up blocks at all sometimes, the way that they kind of touch a guy for a brief second and just let him go. It's just overall not that great. Edge blitzes work very, very well, which I'm not necessarily against, but they almost work too well well because sometimes the tackles just completely ignore a cornerback or somebody coming on the outside on a blitz when they don't really have anybody else to pick up. So is this an area they maybe could tune and make it a little better before the game comes out? Possibly, but since O-line has just kind of consistently been bad anyway, there's only so much better they can probably make it, even if they do make it better. It's not going to be a drastic difference. This is an area that just quite frankly needs to get that same upgrade that tackling and that zone defense got. And speaking of blocking, the halfback blocking is pretty useless as well, and it's kind of felt that way for about a year or two now. Halfback blocking used to be much better in some of the previous games, but halfback blocking this year seems almost useless. You seem to be better off just letting him go out on a route because half the time he's not really doing anything to help block anyway. And a new area of blocking that somehow just got bad out of nowhere seems to be RPO blocking. Again, maybe this is one they could fix before the game comes out, but a lot of the screen RPO plays, the blocking is just really bad, and a lot of people have mentioned this, so I know it's not just me. A lot of people have brought up RPO blocking seems to be significantly worse than it has been in the previous few games, so overall blocking is it's just an area that is not very good. Moving on to tackling, so most of tackling I think is good. It's noticeably better like I talked about briefly, but I will say there are still those janky moments, for a lack of a better word. I don't really know what else to call them. Still a little bit of warping here and there. And I don't expect these things to never happen, especially in a football game, because there are so many moving parts. You got 22 players on a field. You're going to have janky moments. I just think that they happen still a little too often. So it is something worth mentioning. Tackling's better, but it still definitely could be even more better. Cloud flat zones are the one zone in the game that are a little hit or miss. All of the other zones play pretty much exactly how I'd want them to play. They play pretty perfect. I'm happy with them. Cloud flats are the one little hit or miss. They don't get deep enough on the field sometimes. They don't get really to their spot quick enough. It's the only one that's this way, so I don't know if they're going to tune it. Honestly, if I had to pick one way or the other, I would say just don't touch anything about zone coverage as it is, because I think overall it's still very good. Sticking with zone coverage here, the really one bad aspect of it is there are what we call psychic DBs this year. We saw this in some Maddens a few years ago where they can break even with their back turned to the ball. They break very quickly. Now, EA has stated specifically that this is something that they know is an issue and they're going to fix it, they say, before the game comes out. But right now, this is all we have to go off of. And you know, in the past, they've said they're going to fix something before the game comes out, and they haven't. Zone coverage and defense being good is great, but the DBs shouldn't have eyes in the back of their head. That's just taking it a little too far. Moving along, the playbook limitations are definitely one of the worst parts of Madden 23. Now, they did take out about 20% of the plays on purpose. They were plays that a lot of people didn't use or plays that didn't work well, which that I'm not really mad at, but they didn't add enough new plays in. They did add some specific plays to each team's playbook, but the problem is not that they removed plays that were kind of useless. It's that whether those plays are in the game or out, we're still kind of stuck with the same problem of there's not enough good plays in the game. There's some concepts and some formations that just aren't that viable, either because the formations don't have enough plays in them to disguise and build around, or because there's just certain concepts that don't work as well in Madden as they might work in real life. So people tend to stick to the same few formations and the same few plays, and I think this year you're going to see that happen more and more because now they've removed more from the game and they didn't really add a lot of new in for people to experiment with, not enough new. So this is an area that really needs a lot of work. And then there's the fumbles. Now, some people might think this is fine. A lot of people I know don't like it. There seems to be a lot of fumbles in Madden 23, and it's on purpose. There's a lot of fumbles that come with a lot of the new tackle animations where you get stood up by multiple defenders and a guy will come in and punch the ball out, try to rip the ball free, which looks cool. It looks like real football. That's what you see in real football. From a video game standpoint, it's not the most fun if you're fumbling multiple times every single game, because some of these animations have that predetermined thing where a guy comes in and he does punch the ball out. Now, yes, as the offensive player, technically you have the option to protect the ball, which can help against this, and you also have the option to give yourself up and go down. So really, you can say that as long as the offense has a way to prevent the fumble from happening, well, you can't complain about it. But the other side of this is that tackle battles have been reintroduced to the game, and if they want the offensive player to participate in tackle battles, it's going to be hard to do that if there's too high of a risk of fumbling. Most people are just going to give themselves up because nobody wants to fumble. So I think they could do that better in terms of balancing to maybe make the fumbles a little less frequent, and I think that would be a good thing for everybody. That's going to be it for this video. If you want to know about franchise mode in Madden 23, check out this video right here on the screen where I break it down.